I want to thank everybody for joining us for today's webinar, Knowing What to Look For, Advancing Lab Operations Through Smart Analysis, presented by Agilent. Next slide, please. Before we get into the presentation and before we introduce our great speaker for today, I wanted to talk a little bit about who Asterix Technology is. You may have attended some of our webinars in this great series we've been putting on now since early fall, and which will continue to go through the year, where we are inviting on industry thought leaders from throughout the industry in lab informatics to get different and varied perspectives on the future of the lab, and what are the trends happening in the lab. So it's just been a fantastic experience to bring on some great thought leaders. And the reason Asterix is doing this is because we're right in the middle of lab informatics. We're a lab informatics professional services and strategic outsourced solutions company who's 100% dedicated to serving the scientific community. A couple of quick stats. We are privately held. We were established in 1995. It started as the IT division of a company called APBI Life Science. We have 7 offices and 1 in beautiful Costa Rica and headquarters in Red Bank, New Jersey. We help life science enterprises, chemical, CPG, government companies who have, one common theme is they have large, fast-growing IT and outsourced compliance needs. Our mission has and always will be to deliver scalable, sustainable solutions for the scientific community. You can go to the next slide, please. In the grand scheme of things, what we're doing, what we're working with companies on, is we come in and we help them decide and determine and architect, really what kind of technology they need to run their lab, depending on their unique needs. And this is everything from doing business process analysis through enterprise architecture design, and then helping them select the right technologies, like an Agilent, to put in place so that they can achieve their goals. We can do development and implementation of these solutions, and then when that's complete, we can do complete computer systems validation. And then even from there, we've got solutions where we can help manage those applications for them, or even potentially provide staffing. Next slide, please. We're going to go ahead and turn it over to our speakers for today, Greg Stevens and Melissa Zier. So I'm going to go ahead and quiet down and let you guys take it on. You are on mute.
Great, thank you very much. All righty, I should be unmuted now. My name is Melissa Zier, and I'm an applications expert with Agilent Technologies. And I will get us started. Today's labs are large and complicated, with complex equipment, numerous vendors, IT infrastructure security requirements, difficult data collection methods, and many other challenges. If you're responsible for a laboratory, you're keenly aware of the effort it takes to gather data to make decisions with confidence, targeted to improve results. It's difficult to get full visibility because of geographical differences, new acquisitions, data collection methods and analysis, and a variety of other reasons. Greg and I will discuss some of the barriers to using lab-wide instrument data to make capital expense decisions, reduce operational expenses, and improve productivity, and we'll discuss how to overcome them. We'll go through some of the hidden costs of not collecting instrument usage data and show Internet of Things technology available today to help lab managers measure instrument usage. We will finish today's webinar with some real-world examples of outcomes that laboratories have achieved through embracing the digital lab to simplify, optimize, and transform operations. But first, I would like to get started with a polling question to set the mood. So polling question 1 is, how do you use data to make decisions in your laboratory? Okay, it looks like polling question 1 has launched, so please do take a minute to respond to this question. And then as the responses come in, I'll go ahead and review them with you.
All right, we're going to leave the poll open for just another 10 seconds here, and then we'll show you the results. The poll is going to go ahead and close.
Okay, great, thank you.
See the results up on the screen.
So it looks excellent. It looks like we have about a third of respondents regularly using laboratory data to make all of their decisions. About a third of respondents saying that it depends on what their lab needs, and that will dictate how they use data. And almost a third of respondents indicated that they use data for cost-related decisions. So this is a pretty good spread here. And Greg and I are going to speak today about using data more regularly to make decisions in your laboratory. So innovation is the heart of the modern laboratory. Our lives are improved every day thanks to the discovery and research that is performed within them. At Agilent, we see the challenges that every lab faces. At the top, labs face unprecedented levels of global competition and must also react to evolving markets as healthcare, energy, and social needs change quickly. And this environment is not a vacuum. Speed to market, a driver of business success, is challenged by tightening budgetary constraints, fluctuating business scopes, and changing priorities. Speed must be balanced with consumer safety. Consumer expectations are redefining a successful product. Consumers are more informed than they have ever been and can now focus on the balance between risks and benefits of a product, as well as environmental impacts and social responsibility. And changes to regulations lead to increasing scrutiny from regulators. All of these things are connected, which leads to the question, how can I remain competitive in the face of these challenges in an increasingly complicated and changing landscape? The answer is through building efficient, dynamic laboratory operations. These laboratories have the capacity to meet challenges and changes to priorities. By ensuring that operations are optimized for purpose and the right equipment and expertise is available, labs can meet their speed to market goals. Standardizing instruments, compliance protocols, and maintenance schedules mitigates regulatory risks. Standardization also provides visibility into the lab operations so that you can achieve the goals that you set. The process of simplifying and optimizing the modern laboratory may appear to be a series of trials and errors. However, there are principles that you can follow to build a path. The impact of visibility and efficiency building will enable you to benchmark your operations and to modify and improve them. This prepares labs to transform when the necessity arises. To begin to know what to look for when advancing lab operations through smart analysis, I'll begin in the laboratory. Your laboratory creates lots of data around your operations. As you plan for your laboratory to meet your business needs, you acquire instruments and retire them. As a part of deployment, you validate those instruments and you qualify them. You install and qualify software. You move your instruments and you requalify them. You create methods on your instruments and you use them for analysis. The use of analytical instrumentation relies on proper use of preparatory equipment, and you train your teams for this. You maintain and repair your instruments and equipment. You take care of your assets, and on occasion you break them. Each decision you make around the points of this cycle involves your operations, your CapEx or OpEx budgets, and different stakeholders across your enterprise. All of these decisions create data points. This cycle of decisions to use, qualify, manage, and optimize is the laboratory asset lifecycle. To improve the efficiency of laboratory operations, the data generated from the laboratory asset lifecycle must be captured, transformed to useful information, and analyzed through a cycle of measuring, benchmarking, and modifying different processes to generate outcomes that have a benefit to your lab. The governance of the laboratory asset lifecycle is called asset management. The goal is to cost efficiently reduce risk to the business while returning value across the laboratory asset lifecycle. The modern laboratory must use all available data to make impactful decisions to meet its needs. So here's a little bit of what your industry peers say about the needs of their labs. Agilent has recently polled groups of laboratory stakeholders to investigate some of the different factors that are contributing to the changes that they need to make in their labs. You can see the different labs have different needs, and therefore there's no one-size-fits-all solution for what laboratories today face. New technology is perceived as one of the primary necessities for the evolving conditions of laboratory operations. Other labs need visibility into and more usage of their current inventories and support navigating and doing lab compliance. With new technology and with any adjustments that drive labs towards the ideal state of modern operations, there are costs associated with change and adoption. Prioritization and products that respond to these needs all require data-driven decisions that can be derived from the digital laboratory. Digital solutions can alleviate some of the manual and interpretive burdens on team members to gather and analyze data. I want to bring your attention to the second percentage value. About a fifth of respondents indicated that they need integrated operational data sources. With the growing reliance on data and digital, this is likely underrepresented. Because this seems like such a difficult area to tackle, it's frequently overlooked or sidelined. Knowing that the governance of the laboratory asset lifecycle, asset management, should rely on this data, I want to make this more approachable. That's why I'm here today. With our next polling question, we'll break into the practical aspects of gathering data to make laboratory decisions. So polling question 2 is, how do you collect your laboratory data? Great, and we're starting to see some of the responses coming in.
Close in about 30 seconds.
Great. Okay, the poll has closed and the results are being shared. It seems like we have a wide variety of techniques for collecting laboratory data. About a third of respondents have software that collects and aggregates 50% or more of their laboratory data. About a quarter of respondents are doing this manually. So this is great information, and this is a snapshot of what we're seeing right now with laboratory data collection. Greg and I are really going to focus today on the digital lab and how to broaden your data collection methods. So there are steps that you can take to use the data that your laboratory generates to make impactful data-driven decisions. You aggregate data, analyze data, and identify that result in measurable outcomes. Currently, at Agilent, we see different ways of gathering and using data to make laboratory decisions. And as you could see from our last poll results, there's a wide variety of ways to do this even on this call right now. Some data users collect data manually. Now this can be inconsistent, and it relies on the individual to gather complete data, standardize it, and format it into a usable arrangement. These data can be siloed into groups or labs and may not generate the complete picture needed to make an impact across a department or organization. Even automated data feeds may only capture a part of this picture. Once data is collected, it must be analyzed. I see homegrown systems of data analysis or complicated bespoke analytical tools that are not fit for the purpose of improving laboratory operations frequently. Laboratories often use their Microsoft toolkits to visualize their data, but most of these applications are designed for viewing data rather than creating meaningful analysis. This frequently leads to inconsistent analysis of data based on the interpretation of individuals, and it can be a barrier to consistent, regular data review. Data collection and use may overtax scientific team members. When scientists are performing administrative functions or non-core tasks like inventory, business justifications for spend, and contract management, they're actually having time taken away from doing their meaningful scientific work. And with the non-centralized data gathering and analysis, there's often a vacuum of responsibility for follow-through, meaning that even if you can gather the data, analyze it, and identify opportunities for optimization, Project design and leadership for change is an added burden to management with an already full plate. Barriers to meeting the evolving needs of your laboratory through realistic operational goals include, but also go beyond gathering and using data to make laboratory decisions. These roadblocks have economic and productivity implications. Instruments are not used to their full potential, and they take up valuable bench space and operational budget. And also, unnecessary downtime is costly as well as inconvenient. Agilent has found that across laboratories, about 66% of instruments are used less than 5 hours per week. Labs also spend up to 30% of their maintenance budgets on equipment that does not meet their current needs. Also, we found that instrument downtime can cost about $9,000 per day. These hidden costs of not using the data your lab generates can add up, but can also be mitigated through digital solutions. There are 4 roadblocks that stand between your operations and using digital solutions to impact the hidden costs of not using lab data, and I'm going to highlight them now. Laboratories often lack the visibility into their operations because they don't have quality inventory, utilization, service history, and other laboratory data sources that can be collected. Without these data in a usable format, a laboratory might be unable to identify actionable insights from analytics or may not have analytics. Frequently, labs lack the agility to change when their business needs call for change. And overall, labs are just starting to scratch the surface of looking across their operations holistically. This is something we refer to as the enterprise space. The laboratory is an increasingly complicated and changing workplace. Greg is going to take over and speak to some of the ways that the digital laboratory will move your operations towards meeting the challenges of this modern landscape. So I'm going to go ahead and hand over to Greg now. Greg, would you like to take over?
Sure, thanks, Melissa. Hi, everybody. My name's Greg Stevens. I'm a digital services specialist for Agilent. Okay, over the course of the next few minutes, we'll just drill down into the digital laboratory a little further and start to understand some of the hows and whys, and indeed why people are moving forward in that digital space. So next slide, please, Melissa. So why leverage digital solutions? Well, when we look at the market, we actually see that there are 3 high-level outcomes that customers are reaching for when they look to a digital solution. Namely, they are increased efficiency, risk mitigation, and better asset management outcomes. That's what you see on the top of the slide there. So from the left, increased efficiency probably looks something like an increase in workflow productivity or optimizing the maintenance, both spend and time spent on maintenance, and ultimately drives towards some financial benefit. Risk mitigation in the center probably unlocks the ability to be able to identify productivity bottlenecks, reduce the risk of failure, and also offer some cost avoidance. And then on the right-hand side, we have asset management and better asset management outcomes. So they tend to look towards having a better insight into knowing what to buy, the quantity that you need to buy it in, and how you should buy it. Optimizing workflow productivity, and also insights into maintaining and disposing of aged assets at the right time. How do you go about leveraging those digital solutions? Well, that's what we have on the lower half of the slide. So from left to right, there are several ways that you could engage a partner, or indeed look to your own resources to leverage a digital solution. So that could be looking to unlock the potential from instrument with onboard technology. You could be working with consultants or service providers who can support the leverage of digital solutions. You could engage with asset management specialists or indeed specialist software providers, or it could be that you are looking at your own resources and starting to pull resources together to provide your own in-house solution. The next part I'd like to cover is something that is not so often discussed, and that is that there is a gap. So this gap or barrier between you engaging the people and solutions and achieving those outcomes. And what I'd like to do is just explore that in a little more detail. There are two main areas to explore. They are the technical gap and then the cultural gap. So let's start with the technical. On the left-hand side, you can see that there are three further areas that comprise of the technical gap. And typically, that is not having adequate quality data at source level, not being able to join or integrate data from multiple sources, and also failing to visualize the data with the right end result in mind. Now let's take a look at the right-hand side. So that's the cultural gap, and typically these can be characterized in three areas. So first of all, the data literacy required within an organization is often underestimated in order that you interact with data in a proficient manner. The time investment that an organization is required to make this change in using a digital solution is also often underestimated. And then perhaps relating to probably one of the most important topics is the ability to connect data to an insight and an insight to an action. Perhaps the most important point from both the technical and the cultural gap is the ability of an organization to accept data as the best input into decision making over older legacy processes. The critical step here is to create the right culture to accept the data, use the data to drive insights, and then connect the insight to an action. Not everybody is ready to take that step. So I'm just going to pause at this point and ask the third polling question. So question 3, how does your organization manage change? So if you could start to populate those answers, but how does your organization manage change? We've clearly defined change control processes and change. We have clearly defined change control processes led by the lab, ad hoc plans for change, or we don't have any change control plans. And I can see that the answers are starting to flow in right now.
I'll give it a few more seconds and then we'll watch it.
Okay, perfect. Well, thanks everybody for taking part in that polling question. Some interesting results. So again, we've got that third. A third of people who voted or polled this question have clearly defined change control processes. 1/3 have clearly defined changes led by the lab, and then about 1/5 build ad hoc plans for change. Fantastic. Thank you very much for taking part there. Okay, next slide. Thanks, Melissa. So we exposed the gap in the previous slide. Now let's focus on exploring the gap that we identified, and I think we can probably categorize the gap into 4 distinct focus areas. So inventory, connectivity, visualizations, and then actionable insights. So let's start by taking a look at inventory first. The scientific asset inventory is the foundation of all asset management activities, from understanding capacities and what you need to plan for and acquire, to setting the right maintenance and operational cadence, and identifying when it's the right time to retire an instrument. We find from industry that inventory accuracy is typically between 60 and 80%. So having inaccuracy in that foundational data carries through the process, meaning any recommendations that you would make based upon the data that you visualize are undermined by that inaccuracy at the front end. Gaining data from instruments from across the laboratory from different technologies and technologies from different manufacturers is very hard. When you can get the access, comparing the data from two different groups often looks quite different, and that's because it probably is. Measurements are often made differently, parameters vary, and definitions change, and this is a problem. And in fact, an investigation by Gartner suggested that 85% of big data projects fail because of this, and that's the inability to integrate multiple data sources. Taking data and visualizations to make interactions with the data easy is another area that holds potential for, or a potential for failure. Industry research that there are three areas in which visualizations tend to fail. Firstly, not starting with the end in mind and failing to define the problem statement significantly affects a user's ability to develop any analysis. Typically, visualizations are overcomplicated. And then finally, the visualizations are not specific enough for the end user. The last stage of exploration of the gap focuses on taking action. Having gained access to good quality, accurate, integrated, or unified data that has been visualized correctly. At this point, it becomes an issue or a challenge around organizational capability and culture to accept data into the decision-making process and then act based upon the insight and the data generated. As you can see, the Harvard Business Review found that 93% of executives still look to organizational culture as being the biggest barrier to success for digital projects. Therefore, addressing the technical aspects of the gap won't guarantee success. A combination of addressing the technical capability, but also change management is required to make digital endeavors a success. In our experience, this is how we address, how we suggest that you would close the gap. So first of all, bring accuracy to the foundational data in the inventory and allow for dynamic changes that reflect the real world. Consider technology and IoT sensors that remove the need for further integration. Create analytics that are purposeful, very clear with their outcomes, and speak to the user and are simple to understand and easy to interact with. And then finally, yeah, we'd agree, changing a culture is tough. Closing the gap in the focus area of inventory, connectivity, and visualizations are significant changes to make. But if the organization is not ready to work with the data and insights as a result of closing that gap in the first three segments, there still will be no benefit. So by sharing simple, purposeful analytics in an organization is a really good first step in creating data literacy and fostering the data culture. So by addressing the technical and cultural gaps, we can create the bridge between the how and the why. To summarize on these points, the outcomes at the top of the slide are what almost every organization has a desire to achieve through digital solutions. There are a number of ways to leverage digital solutions as seen on the bottom half of the slide. So specialist suppliers, OEM instrument manufacturers, etc. Or it could be that you as an organization has an intent to use its own expertise or use your own expertise and resources. There is a gap that needs to be addressed, and in almost every case, source data and inventory accuracy will be the first thing that needs to be addressed. Choosing the right way to take data from the instruments should be considered carefully. Removing any barriers to integration is critical. Visualized data needs to be simple yet insightful for the data consumer. And finally, it's highly likely that any organization will need to change the culture and make data a fundamental part of the process. If the gap can be closed, the organization will start to use the data to drive projects and programs that will result in increased efficiencies, risk mitigation, and better asset management outcomes. So as a final stage of my part of the presentation, I just wanted to give you one example of an Agilent digital solution, which is cross-lab asset monitoring. Asset monitoring takes instrument utilization data from across the lab and provides the customer analytics and insights that can improve the business outcomes. And let me explain a little further. As previously discussed, inventory is the cornerstone of any program. Also discussed earlier, a poor level of accuracy in any source data, such as inventory, sets the tone for the outcome. If the inventory is not accurate, the insights will not be actionable. Agilent have developed processes and tools to ensure that we sustain high levels of inventory accuracy to support our customers and the program. Addressing connectivity is our next focus. For the asset monitoring solution, we achieve this by having a portfolio of IoT sensors that allow us to connect to different lab equipment. So different technologies and instruments from different manufacturers, creating an ability to connect instruments throughout the lab. Whilst there is a portfolio of sensors, the key piece of information is that the utilization output that's created by each IoT sensor type is the same. So we remove the need to perform any integration as a subsequent step. The then unified utilization data from the lab is then visualized in simple analytics that speak to an insight. So it could be around increasing efficiencies, productivity, opportunities, or to reduce costs, mitigate risk, what you need to purchase or how to purchase it. That takes care of the technical gap, and to some extent, it also addresses the cultural gap. Now you have a single source of the truth for instrument utilization that provides simple, insightful analytics, helping to facilitate consensus and decisions are being made, projects launched, and you're moving forward. But at Agilent, we wanted to provide our customers with something a little more than that. In addition to the technical solution, we also provide a program manager with every asset monitoring program, helping to further address and close that cultural gap. Agilent program managers are on hand throughout an engagement to provide the support and guidance, not only to onboard users, but also provide guidance to bring their industry knowledge and apply it to your instruments through your data and get to your organizational goals. Program managers collaborate with our customers and are there to help you to achieve your business goals and help you to increase the data literacy and develop the data culture for your organization. So polling question 4. This time, the question is, will your organization allow lab systems to be securely connected to the internet if there is a significant business value? So I believe the poll's open, and we're starting to see some of those results come through. So thank you.
Leave it open for a few more seconds.
So this polling question is actually a little bit different from what I see on the screen right now than the polling question about allowing lab systems to connect to the internet. Is that what you see as well?
Yeah, you're correct. Sorry, that's my mistake. Apologies. So yeah, you should obviously answer the question that's up. So yeah, do you want to take it from here, Melissa?
I'm happy to.
Thank you.
The polling question, I believe that everyone was asked, actually was similar to a polling question that we asked earlier about the collection of laboratory data. The results are similar, although I think after a review of digital solutions, we have a few more respondents indicating that they have software that's collecting and aggregating data for them. So thank you for that. And I will go ahead and I'm going to move on past this polling question. Okay. So as promised, I'm going to go through some real-world examples of how Agilent's customers have applied digital solutions in their laboratory to generate financial and productivity outcomes. And I've seen many examples of labs using their operational data to make significant improvements to their asset management. By embracing the digital lab, they've made decisions on preventative maintenance harmonization, compliance protocol standardization, and inventory visibility. They've achieved new levels of excellence by integrating contextual utilization data, such as the data that Greg spoke about collecting, with service history and workflow requirements to drive labs to optimal performance. So in my first example here, a big pharma R&D site was able to simplify their operations by creating an inventory program and integrating service records. This resulted in a 26% reduction in contract costs and a $400,000 capital expense avoidance. The partner program that the site opted for has saved them over 300 hours that scientists would have used collecting and maintaining inventory rosters. In the next case study, by analyzing instrument utilization with service costs, a mid-sized biotech QC lab was able to reduce their operational expense by $68,000 annually by avoiding unnecessary planned service events and by retiring unused instruments. They also avoided a $250,000 purchase by better utilizing capacity that they already had on hand. This optimization also led to the identification of assets that were no longer useful that were sold to the tune of $26,000. So they were able to unlock some of the residual value of instruments in their laboratory once they were no longer being put to productive use. In my final example here, a sterile manufacturing facility was able to choose and standardize their cold storage units that reduced their power consumption up to 59% over the older, less efficient models. And they found the flexibility to increase the capacity of a workflow already in existence without making a $76,000 purchase that they thought that they needed to enhance that workflow. This, combined with critical path workflows experiencing less disruption due to better scheduling of maintenance events, is leading this company through a transformation to a modern digital lab. So these are just a few examples of how Agilent's customers have embraced digital solutions to measure, benchmark, and modify their operations to progress their journey to laboratory excellence. And the digital laboratory is just one category of enterprise services designed to facilitate the journey towards laboratory excellence. Combined with asset management, compliance assurance, and operations expertise, these cross-lab enterprise services capabilities will help you to simplify your operations, providing better visibility and control over your lab's operations and finances. Once your labs have achieved visibility and control, the levers will be in place to optimize those operations with measurable economic and productivity outcomes, leaving your lab positioned to transform into the modern lab of the future. Agilent is here to help you navigate the digital lab and enterprise services. So I think we're going to have some time now for Q&A. Before we get started with that, I wanted to put my contact information and Greg's contact information on the screen one more time. Please do take this down. Greg and I are available for questions that arise in the near or long-term future. So I'll leave this up for another second, and then I will prepare to turn the Q&A moderation back over to Asterix.
Thank you, Melissa. Appreciate that.
Okay. Great.
Well, we want to thank obviously our presenters for a great job and certainly some insightful information. As I mentioned, today's session is being recorded. We're actually going to go ahead and stop